Hey y'all, let's take a quick look at surface features of the brain. This one has been colored to show different regions of the cerebral cortex. So there's several ways in which we can divide up the brain. We can divide it up by hemisphere. We have, if this is the anterior side, we have the left hemisphere and we have the right hemisphere, separated by the longitudinal fissure. This is known as a longitudinal fissure. The falx cerebri fits within the longitudinal fissure, and it goes in as deep as the corpus callosum. So it would form this crescent shape. The term falx means crescent, or what is it, a sickle? It's a curved shape. So it fits in as deep as that. Longitudinal fissure separates right and left hemispheres. We can separate the cerebrum. This is the highly folded part of the brain, is known as the cerebrum. The cerebrum from the cerebellum. Here is the transverse fissure in the posterior view. Transverse fissure. Longitudinal fissure, transverse fissure. The term fissure implies that it's a very deep divide between two areas, and there is that fused dura mater that enters these spaces as well, like the falx cerebri. If it's not as deep, but it's still a wrinkle, that's what a sulcus is. So we've got a lateral sulcus here. This is the lateral sulcus on either side. If we peel away the lateral sulcus deep to it, we can see the insular cortex. You can see the insular cortex there. The lateral sulcus is the border between the temporal lobe and the other lobes. The temporal lobe houses things like the auditory cortex. Auditory cortex is important for processing sound, which makes sense because our ears are on either side. So the temporal lobe houses the auditory cortex. In the back, we have the occipital lobe. And the occipital lobe, one major thing that it's important for is for processing vision. I mean, our eyes are over here, so why would the back of the head be important for vision? If you look at the pathway, if the eyes are here, here's the optic nerve. It crosses the chiasm. From the chiasm, it goes to optic tracts. From the tracts, it'll stop at the thalamus, which is actually, so here's the optic chiasm, optic tract to the thalamus, and then from the thalamus, it'll make its way to the occipital lobe, the visual cortex in the occipital lobe. So it takes a bit of a path from the front of the head, the anterior side, to the posterior side. Above the temporal lobe, above the lateral sulcus, we have the frontal lobe and the parietal lobe. Frontal lobe in front, as the name suggests, it's important for a lot of different things, namely executive functions like decision making, inhibitions. If you happen to get inebriated, then this area of your brain has been affected. You lack inhibition. You start doing things that you would normally tell yourself to stop doing. It's also really important for motor control. Your primary motor cortex is in this gyrus. The primary motor cortex is in what's called the precentral gyrus. Precentral gyrus. Why is it called the precentral gyrus? Gyrus means fold that comes out at you. It's the peak. So the valley that would go in, the wrinkle, that's the sulcus. This is the central sulcus, this division here. On this model, it's nicely colored. We can see the precentral gyrus and the postcentral gyrus. So here's the central sulcus. On other models, we might not see it as clearly. So here, the deep sulcus that goes nearly all the way across and about midway, maybe even slightly more than midway past the lateral sulcus, that's the central sulcus. If we look on the other side of it, through our mid-sagittal cut, it tends to line up with a deep sulcus. Doesn't go all the way in towards the what's this called? Corpus callosum, but it goes in pretty deep. So central sulcus, it's not a perfectly straight sulcus, but it's a fairly deep one. This is the division between the frontal lobe and the parietal lobe. So in the frontal lobe, in the precentral gyrus specifically, so in this specific fold of the frontal lobe, that's where you find the primary motor cortex. Primary motor cortex is where we have neurons that generate signals to control our skeletal muscle movements. posterior caudal to the precentral gyrus, and we have the postcentral gyrus, labeled here in blue. The postcentral gyrus is an area for sensing things from our skin. So this is the primary somatosensory cortex. Things like touch, temperature, pain, itch are processed in the primary somatosensory cortex. So if I touch something with my fingers, I've got, say, Meissner's corpuscles in the skin, in the dermal papillae, and that leads up my arm to my spinal cord, up my spinal cord, ascending through the medulla, projecting all the way to the primary somatosensory cortex. Of course, this would be over 2 or 3 neurons. Actually, it would be 3 neurons in that case. We'll get to that later. But yeah, it ends here in the primary somatosensory cortex. So to recap, in the frontal lobe, we can find the primary motor cortex. In the parietal lobe, we can find the primary somatosensory cortex. In the occipital lobe, we can find the visual cortex. In the temporal lobe, we can find the auditory cortex. And in the insular cortex, we can also find areas that are important for smell, for olfaction. Those are some basic features of the outside superficial parts of the brain.